think there's anything else I can think of to say right now. So I would like to turn the screen over to Katie Fallon, who is going to talk to us about the Cerulean Warbler, very endangered bird, and why, what's special about it, and how we can perhaps help to save it. Katie, it's all yours.
All right, thank you very much, Juanita, and thank you, Jim. I'm excited to be here talking with everybody, and thank you to all the attendees who are here to hear about Cerulean Warblers this evening. I always love listening to the announcements that other bird clubs do before these talks. I'm active with my local Audubon chapter, and I also work with a nonprofit organization called the Avian Conservation Center of Appalachia, which is a long name. We usually say ACCA, but we sponsor a birding cup. This will be the second year. So last year was our first birding cup. And of course there was COVID, so it didn't go exactly as planned, but we had 74 families sign up to participate in the birding cup last year. And we made the rule that you had to stay in a group of people who lived together or were already exposed to each other, and they could only go birding within walking distance of where they lived. So it was pretty cool. Anyway, so thank you very much again for having me, and I'm really excited to talk to you about Cerulean Warblers. Hopefully that I'm sort of hiding from my children in my room above my garage, but they're going to go to bed soon. But we could have one of those moments where children, burst into the room and Zoom bomb, but I think that will be safe. So I'm going to go ahead and start to share my screen, and hopefully you can all see that beautiful little bird. So I'm here in West Virginia giving this presentation, Morgantown, West Virginia, which is very close to the border of Pennsylvania. But I grew up near Scranton, Pennsylvania, which is not very far from where most of you probably are in New Jersey. And it's a part of the country that I love, and I've got a lot of great friends in the Philadelphia area as well. So I'm excited to be here. So I want to also mention before I get started that most of the really nice pictures in this presentation are not pictures that I have taken myself. Most of them are pictures that other generous friends of mine have sent to me to allow me to use in my presentation. Like this one, this beautiful bird is a Cerulean Warbler from Kentucky. That I can't take credit for this photograph. So my background with this bird goes back about almost 20 years now. I first really heard of the Cerulean Warbler in 2000 or 2001 when I was in graduate school at West Virginia University. I went to a presentation given by a biologist, and it was a presentation at a local bird club meeting. And the biologist studied Cerulean Warblers and their response to certain kinds of strip mining in the area. So I attended the talk, and I was fascinated listening to the story of this beautiful bird that was in steep decline. And I thought somebody should write a book about that. But I didn't think it would be me. But I still sort of started a file folder of articles about Ceruleans, and I always kind of had them on my radar. But then I got married, I finished grad school, I moved to Virginia and got a teaching job, and I kind of, I didn't forget about Ceruleans, but I wasn't working on the book. But then in late 2006, early 2007, the Cerulean Warbler was denied threatened status under the Endangered Species Act, despite being in steep decline. And I thought, how is it possible that, this very quickly this declining songbird was not considered threatened or endangered? So I started investigating it more, and I realized that nobody had written a book yet. So I thought, okay, I should probably take a stab at this and do it. So I'm coming at this as a creative writer. I was teaching writing at Virginia Tech at the time that I wrote this book. So I'm not officially a biologist. I'm a bird watcher, a birder like all of you, who became obsessed with this beautiful species. So the book came out in 2011. So this is the 10-year anniversary, 2011 or 2021 of the publication of this book, and I'm really excited that there has been continued interest in this bird for the last 10 years. It hasn't really decreased in interest. So that makes me really happy. So the book came out in 2011, but then I say last year, but this wasn't actually last year. It was almost 2 years ago now. This was the last time we were allowed to sort of gather and have bird festivals. This is the New River Birding and Nature Festival near the New River Gorge in West Virginia. And this is Bill Hilton, who is a bird bander from South Carolina. And at the birding festival, he sets up mist nets every year. And 2019 was the first year that the first time he had caught a Cerulean Warbler at the festival. And I happened to be standing there when he caught the bird. And somebody said, go grab a copy of Katie's book and let the bird meet the book. So it was sort of a silly photo op, but I had to put it in this presentation. So it took several years before a real Cerulean Warbler was introduced to its likeness on the book cover. So let's get to talk about the bird itself. So this is enough about me. So I like to start with this picture because this is a photograph that I took from the passenger seat of a 4-seat airplane. This is Southern West Virginia, which in my opinion is one of the most beautiful places on the planet. There are certainly are parts of Pennsylvania and New Jersey that look very similar to this. And it's nice Appalachian mountains covered with hardwood forests. And one of the reasons I like this picture so much is that you can't really see many human structures or development. It's just mountains. This is probably Kanawha County or Raleigh County or possibly Boone County, West Virginia. I was able to fly over this area as part of a tour for people who are interested in seeing what mountaintop removal coal mining looked like from the air. And we'll talk more about that in a few minutes, but I was very nervous. I'm not a very good flyer despite liking birds so much. And there were controls in front of me in the passenger seat. And I said to the pilot, do I have to do anything with these controls? And he said, I hope not. So it was nerve-wracking, but I still got a lot of beautiful pictures. So Southern West Virginia is really the heart of the Cerulean Warbler's breeding range. And this is the most words on any slide, so don't worry, most of the rest of the slides are pictures, but I wanted to get this information out while everybody was still wide awake. So the Cerulean Warbler, it's one of our fastest declining neotropical migratory songbirds. Neotropical migrants, you probably know, are those species that might breed in North America and then migrate to the tropics for the winter. So most of our warblers, thrushes, flycatchers, of course, hummingbirds, our broad-winged hawk is a neotropical migrant. A lot of birds that eat insects, orioles, tanagers, these are all species that go to the tropics in the wintertime. So of those species, the Cerulean is the fastest declining or one of the fastest declining. It can be tough to pin down exactly which one is declining fastest, but a lot of our songbirds are declining quite quickly. The Cerulean Warbler has lost about 3% of its population every year since 1966, which is when they started counting and doing the breeding bird surveys. The Golden Wing Warbler is declining almost as fast or as fast, and a few other warbler species as well. So the vast majority of the Cerulean Warbler population, more than 70%, breeds in central Appalachia. So that's roughly Pennsylvania to eastern Tennessee, all of West Virginia, eastern Kentucky, some of southeastern Ohio, some of southwestern Virginia. And the coolest thing, I think, or one of the reasons I love this bird, is that about 35 to 36% of the world's Cerulean warblers breed in West Virginia. usually in West Virginia, we're used to, being, at the bottom of the list for everything important. But for cerulean warblers, we are at the top of the list. We have more breeding ceruleans than any other state. So that makes me feel proud, I guess, that we have so many cerulean warblers here. And really, southern West Virginia is where most of them are in West Virginia. Although where I am, and I'm in north central West Virginia, and we do have ceruleans here, but really that southern New River Gorge area has most of the cerulean warblers, a lot of them. West Virginia is also, interestingly, first for wood thrush also. Pennsylvania is pretty close, but West Virginia has more breeding wood thrush than any other state. So in this part of the country, central Appalachia, ceruleans prefer to nest in large tracts of mature to old growth hardwood forests, and here it's on ridges. This is not always the case. A lot of areas where there are rivers and big old sycamores along rivers and riparian forests, ceruleans may nest there also. When John James Audubon was doing his surveys of the birds in North America, he was noting that ceruleans were in the riparian forests with large hardwood trees along the rivers. But a lot of those forests are gone now. We still have some large tracts of mature to old growth hardwood forests on ridges. Something important for ceruleans, though, if the forest is all the same age, like if you have all old trees, that doesn't seem to be as preferred as a forest that has some big old trees, some younger trees, some understory vegetation. They sort of like some canopy diversity. It's a closed canopy is not great for ceruleans, and we'll talk more about that in a couple minutes too. But they are considered an interior forest species, so they will use smallish patches of forest, 25 acres or so, but it has to be in, or ideally it's in, a forested landscape where there's greater than 75% forest cover over 5 or 6 miles. So they are a species that needs the forest, even though the forest can be patchy. So this is the Cornell Lab of Ornithology range map for ceruleans, and we'll come back to this map in a few minutes, but this is just the kind of overview where they live. So I said more than 70% do live in central Appalachia in the breeding season, but they are locally common elsewhere. Ontario has ceruleans. New Jersey has ceruleans, New York, Connecticut has ceruleans, even though on this map, I'm not sure we can really see if it really shows ceruleans in Connecticut, but there are some in Western Connecticut. Missouri has some ceruleans, Michigan has ceruleans. So Minnesota has some. So they are locally common elsewhere, but the vast majority are in central Appalachia. This map sort of makes it look like the yellow is the migratory region. It sort of makes it look like they migrate along the Gulf of Mexico, but they don't. Most biologists agree that they are a trans-Gulf migrant. However, there is some data from geolocators that at least some ceruleans cross the Caribbean instead of going across the Gulf of Mexico. There is some evidence that they cross Cuba, at least on the fall migration, which is kind of fascinating. And then they pass through Central America very quickly. At least some of them stop in Central America on their way to South America, where they spend the winters in the northern Andes, Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and a little bit of Bolivia. A lot of them do spend the winters in Colombia. And these are kind of the middle elevation of the northern Andes. They're not the Andes in Chile or Argentina that are, big snow-capped mountains. These mountains look more like the Appalachian Mountains, and we'll get some pictures in a couple minutes also. So this picture, this is Lewis Wetzel Wildlife Management Area near Jacksonburg, West Virginia, which is a pretty small, fairly remote wildlife management area. And I like to show this picture because this looks like Cerulean Warbler habitat to me. There is a slope, so there's elevation change. There are some large trees. You can see over on the left some very big super emergent trees that stick up above the canopy. There are some smaller trees, some understory vegetation, some grapevines and things like that. And a small road the size of this road provides a gap in the canopy that ceruleans tend to be attracted to, or tend to sort of cluster around gaps in the canopy. The gaps that ceruleans seem to prefer are usually about 400 to 1,000 square foot gaps. So they're not huge gaps. If you think about a big old growth hardwood tree falling down in the forest, the size gap that that would create is about the size gap that a cerulean warbler would like. A power line cut might be okay. A road or a small road or a trail would be all right, but something like a big structure that makes a large gap. If the gap is too large, ceruleans will avoid it. So, and we'll look at some of those large gaps in a couple minutes too. Oh, this is just to remind me. So slope, a complex canopy with some gaps. Some trees with a diameter at breast height of 16 inches or greater, so some large trees. Ceruleans tend to like chestnut oaks, white oaks, sugar maples. They tend to avoid, for whatever reason, red maple, red oak. But sycamores are also ceruleans tend to be in sycamores sometimes. There are a few other species, but white oak and chestnut oak and sugar maple are three that are very important to ceruleans, at least in West Virginia. And they do seem to like some understory vegetation, especially grapevines. So, getting to the bird itself. So, hopefully you've all seen a cerulean warbler while you're out birding. But if you haven't, you have to look in the canopy. They usually stay in the canopy. So this is a bird that will give you a sore neck if you're trying to find it. Up in the canopy, they are eating caterpillars, spiders, leafhoppers, small insects. Caterpillars are very important to a lot of warbler species, and ceruleans are no exception. Caterpillars are important within the pair. The male will often feed the female caterpillars during courtship. During nest building, the male will bring her caterpillars, which is sort of sweet. It's like taking her out to a nice dinner or whatever. But you can often see ceruleans foraging for caterpillars and other small insects as they sort of glean. They take their beaks and run them along the undersides of leaves, and they will sometimes even sort of sally after insects, almost like a flycatcher. These are amazingly small birds. They only weigh 9 to 10 grams. So that's small even for a warbler. 10 grams is about the weight of 2 nickels. If you think about a bird like a screech owl, which is a pretty small bird, screech owls can weigh about 200 grams. So if you compare that to a 10-gram warbler, it's a very small bird. The little wings are only 2.5 inches, 66 millimeters long. I usually think of ceruleans as being long-winged, but the wings are actually they're long on the bird's body, but they aren't, they're still very small. And depending on where you are when you're observing ceruleans, you may notice that they have parallel white wing bars. These can be really difficult to see. Some of you maybe are saying, oh yeah, when can you see the wing bars? Because usually you're looking at a cerulean and it looks like this, if you're lucky, right? This is the view I most often get of a cerulean. It's usually a male and it's usually just its underside. And you can kind of see those long wings sort of hanging down there a little bit. Something that you may notice about this bird, it has a blue-black necklace. This is sort of the key feature that I usually notice if I am on the ground and I'm looking up at a bird and I hear a cerulean singing, but I can't quite see it. And then I spot it and yes, it has a necklace. You're looking at a cerulean. Other warblers that have necklaces, the Canada warbler, magnolia warbler sort of can have a necklace, but those birds have a lot more yellow and gray and have a lot more splotchy stuff along their necklaces. The cerulean usually has a fairly clean necklace, at least the male. This is how, again, you have to look at ceruleans. Typically, if you're out bird watching, they are often way up over your head. You may have to do some acrobatics to see them. This is the New River Birding and Nature Festival again. The birds are right over the road. Another way you can look at ceruleans is to just lie down on your back right on the road and give your neck a break. This was a little later in the day and all of our necks were tired, so we just sort of got down on the ground and observed ceruleans overhead like that. And this sort of a side note, somebody I'm here watching the birds with is Julie Zickafoos, and if you haven't, you may have had her come and speak to your club before, but if you haven't, she's a really great, really wonderful author and crazy bird lady like me. So, but this can be a way to really give your neck a break. You just want to check for ticks, if you're gonna lie down on the ground like that to look for birds. So, if you are lucky enough to see a cerulean sort of at eye level, this is what you might get. And again, this is not my picture. I wish that I could take a picture like this, but depending on the topography, you might be able to look straight at the bird, see the necklace and the parallel white wing bars, and those long sort of drooping wings, which are so beautiful. So compare this picture to, oh wait, no, this is still a nice picture. I was going to make fun of myself, but this guy, again, you can see that blue-black necklace even in the hand. Some ceruleans do have a little bit of splotchiness kind of on the sides. Some of them have a thicker necklace than others, but the only two warblers that I have really ever confused with a cerulean is a black-throated blue. I try to make a black-throated blue into a cerulean every spring, and a black and white warbler. I get very excited about ceruleans this time of year when they're not back yet, but our black and whites are starting to come back, and I always try to make a black and white into a cerulean. Even though black and whites don't have that necklace, they do have that splotchy stuff sometimes on the sides. And this is that drooping wing behavior that male ceruleans will often do when they are singing, possibly trying to set up a territory or attract a mate. They may kind of drop their wings and sort of vibrate them a little bit while they sing and while they are sort of flying around from tree to tree over a gap in the canopy. Oh yes, so there's the photograph I took of a cerulean, which is sort of, out of focus and poorly lit. So this is a female cerulean warbler, and she was very discreet. The females are often not singing, not right out of the branches like males. They're often sort of hopping around the leaves. They blend in remarkably well. They're sort of this kind of aquamarine color, sort of a washed out looking color, have a lot of yellow, especially underneath. It can be a little bit confusing when you look at it. What am I looking at right now? They don't often have a necklace. Sometimes they might have a hint of necklace, but not usually the females I've seen, but they do still have parallel white wing bars. The females that I have seen have almost always been in the vicinity of a male or on a nest. So, but they can be confusing if you see one sometimes without a male singing nearby. You may notice this picture. I really like this picture because the bird is investigating a spider web, or seems to be investigating a spider web. So spiders are, of course, part of the cerulean warbler's diet, but spider webs are used in nest building. The female cerulean warbler does all the nest building herself. The male might sort of hop around in an area where he might think it's a good spot to build a nest, but the female does the nest construction all by herself, or almost all by herself. It's often made of grapevine bark, other pieces of bark, lichens that she sort of weaves together using spider web to help it stick, which is really incredible. The nest is very small. I bet you can't see it in this picture, right? This is another one of Katie's bad photographs. But there is that little tiny black lump on that branch is the cerulean warbler nest. Unfortunately, I don't have a better picture of that. But this nest is fairly typically placed as far as cerulean warbler nests go. They are often about 30 feet off the ground and about halfway out on a horizontal branch. So halfway between the trunk of the tree and the end of the branch is often where ceruleans will place their nests. Not always the case. Of course, it's nature, so there are always exceptions, but this nest is fairly typically placed as far as cerulean warbler nests. They're amazingly small. There may be, 3 or 4 eggs in this, 3 or 4 babies in this tiny nest that's smaller than a teacup. It's often attached to something like a little nub or a twig on the branch, and sometimes there are some leaves or something overhanging the nest. The female, not only does she do all the nest building herself, she also does all the incubating of the eggs herself. Some species, especially some of the bigger raptors and vultures, will switch out. The male and the female will sort of take turns sitting on the nest. But for ceruleans, it's only the female sits on the nest while the male brings her food. Then she's on the nest for about 2 weeks on the eggs, and then the babies hatch, and then the babies are in the nest for another about 2 weeks before they fledge. So it happens pretty fast. The birds are, you've got about a month of being on the nest, associated with the nest if you're that female cerulean warbler, and then you've got to chase your babies around as they try to figure out how to be birds and how to survive. Fledging is a very dangerous time, and then. Let's say these birds are on nest in late May, and then the babies are out of the nest by early July, or the end of June even, and then by August a lot of them are already migrating. So it's a pretty fast learning curve, I guess, pretty steep if you're a young cerulean warbler. So. Now we know a little bit about ceruleans, and we've talked about habitat, but why are they declining? And maybe you're saying at home, habitat loss, which is probably the case for that. Most people agree that habitat loss throughout the range is the reason for the ceruleans decline. There are some different ideas about habitat where, of course, here in the breeding range, we've experienced habitat loss, cerulean habitat loss, certainly deforestation. But there are some forested areas in their breeding range where it seems like we should have ceruleans and we don't have them. And why is that? Is it just that the birds there aren't enough of them, so they don't fill up all the breeding habitat that we have for them? Some folks believe that the habitat loss in the tropics is so severe that the birds don't make it back to the breeding habitat. The birds are also, migrating during hurricane season, which could be certainly problematic if you hit a big storm front. But whatever the case, they're losing habitat throughout their range, in the breeding habitat, in the breeding range, during their migratory corridor, and in their overwintering habitat, which is pretty depressing to think about. So this is one of my favorite things. So if you're on Birds of the World, you can access some of the Cornell Lab of Ornithology's abundance maps that are just fascinating. So I want everybody to watch. If you weren't watching, come back and watch for a second, because this shows cerulean warbler movements throughout the year. So here it starts in January, where they are in South America, and then March, April, and there they go, back up to the breeding range. And then you can watch again, and there they go. And what's interesting, the birds migrate a little bit more slowly during the fall than they do in the spring. In the spring, perhaps there's this, an urgency to get back and set up a territory. There are some studies that suggest that ceruleans cluster their territories. So possibly a male gets back. The first male that gets back might find the best spot and start singing. So then the other males might come near him and think, what does that guy know? We're going to hang out near him. Or perhaps there's a male that's just very successful that younger males kind of want to hang around. I don't think we know the answer for sure, but but they do come back more quickly in the spring. So let's watch that one more time, and you can kind of see how fast they go in the spring. Here we are right now, whoosh. And then, you know, it takes a little bit longer for them to get back in the fall to the tropics. You might notice when you look at where they are in the tropics, there are 3 parallel mountain ranges through Colombia, and and the Ceruleans will use all 3 of those mountain ranges in the tropics. Okay, so I could watch this map all day. If you see, I also give presentations about turkey vultures, and if you ever go on eBird or go on Birds of the World and look at the turkey vulture abundance map, it looks very different. There may be 20 million turkey vultures in the hemisphere, and there are probably only 300,000 to 400,000 cerulean warblers. So, you know, where we just kind of see a little ceruleans trickling up the map, turkey vultures are like, you know, covering nearly the entire thing, which is quite a contrast. Okay, oops, I didn't mean to play that again, although I could watch it all day. Okay, I pulled up your eBird for where you are, Washington Crossing. And I was curious about where you might be seeing ceruleans near you. So these little if you're familiar with eBird, probably a lot of you are. I am sort of very nerdy when it comes to eBird, and whenever I travel anywhere, I immediately go and look at eBird to see where I should be going to see birds. So this should give you an idea if you haven't seen ceruleans around you. At least there are some that pass through on migration, if not breed. Delaware Water Gap is probably not too far from where you are too. And I know there are ceruleans that, or at least there used to be a fairly dense cerulean breeding population in the Delaware Water Gap. So if you haven't checked out eBird for ceruleans near you, you know, they're coming back any day now. So, you know, get out. The Watershed Institute has some, you know, Mercer Meadows. So, and then right near Titusville, I forget the name of that park. Maybe it's Washington Crossing Park. That's right near where you are. So hopefully you'll all get out and see ceruleans this spring. Okay, so coming back to habitat loss. So this is a very depressing picture. This is, again, a photograph I took from that 4-seat airplane flying over southern West Virginia. This is about 35 miles south of Charleston, West Virginia. So this is mountaintop removal coal mining. It's called different things by depending on who's talking about it. It's also called mountaintop mining and valley fill. I usually call it mountaintop removal, but because what it is, it basically, the name says it all. It's a way to extract coal that is inaccessible or too dangerous to get to by deep mining. Or too steep, or for whatever reason, the coal is still in the mountain and hasn't been mined yet via deep mining. So this is a way to get to it. If you can see that kind of on the top of this picture, that there's a layer, the earth sort of looks like a layer cake, and you can see the dark stuff, that's the coal seam. So a mining company will go in and blow up the mountain to expose the coal seam, scrape the coal, blow up a little bit more, scrape the next vein of coal, blow up a little bit more, and scrape the coal. So this obviously causes a gap that is too big for cerulean warblers to use. There has been research that shows that cerulean warblers they avoid a hard edge, a big edge like this. So not only does this remove cerulean habitat outright, it forces ceruleans to move in from the edge. So it's also sort of a startlingly permanent habitat change. I will say, though, that in the last 10 years or so, mountaintop removal has been declining, and coal use in general has been declining. Natural gas has been increasing. There are some studies that have come out, though, that show that clearing areas for natural gas for well pads for drilling operations also creates a gap that's too big for ceruleans. Although a cleared pipeline or a power line cut might be okay, but a big well pad makes too big of a impact for many interior songbirds to use. Other species might use it, but not ceruleans. So this is fortunately sort of on the decline, but it is a pretty startlingly permanent habitat change. This is just sort of showing you the scale of this. And again, this is southern West Virginia, so this is right in the middle of where, you know, the core Cerulean Warbler breeding range. And often when they're kind of finishing up, you have this weird landscape left that it looks like someone takes a big cleaver and just sort of, you know, shears off the tops of the mountains. There are laws that require mining companies to return mined land to approximate original contour. However, it's not really possible to do that when you're talking about a mountain. If you're mining coal in Illinois, where the land is much flatter, you can return it to approximate original contour, but you can't really do that in a very steep mountainous region. You also have to worry about erosion because you've seriously altered the landscape. These terraced areas that you can see on here are valley fills. So those are valleys that have been filled in with the dirt and rocks from the former mountaintop. Oh, excuse me. The pollen is trying to kill me these days. So the valleys that are filled in with dirt and rocks have to be compacted to prevent erosion. So they're often, the dirt is very compacted, it's terraced like this, and it's covered with a grass species that will sort of hold the soil in place. However, because of the way they compact the soil, you can't get trees to grow very easily, at least not white oaks, sugar maples, the sort of trees that ceruleans like. There is an effort called the Appalachian Regional Reforestation Initiative. These are folks whose mission is to, they try to gain access to get property owners to allow them to access the reclaimed mines. They kill the invasive grass species. They uncompact the soil with heavy equipment, bring in topsoil from somewhere else, and then hand plant the trees. So it's possible to get a forest to grow again once you go through that process, but it's labor intensive and expensive, and it will still take 80, 100 years for the trees to get to the age that ceruleans seem to like. Grasshopper sparrows will sometimes use mine sites that look like this, and elk in some parts of southern West Virginia and Kentucky. Folks have reintroduced elk that used to be in this region, but have not been for a long time. But elk will graze on these lands. But unfortunately, it's not great for cerulean warblers. The habitat loss in the migration corridor is also deforestation and fragmentation. Here, it's mostly due to development again in agriculture, especially coffee. I should mention that ceruleans, even though they don't spend the winters in Central America, they have been documented to at least pass through every country except, I believe, El Salvador. I don't think that there are documented ceruleans in El Salvador yet, but every other country in Central America has ceruleans during migration. Unfortunately, it can be really difficult to watch ceruleans in Central America during migration because there's only about 2 weeks in the spring and maybe 2 or 3 weeks in the fall where you might see ceruleans passing through Central America. But at least some do stop. This is, of course, a male cerulean at a coffee farm in Costa Rica. So Cafe Cristina is a shade-grown coffee farm that you can visit if you ever go to Costa Rica and want to see how somebody might grow shade-grown coffee in Costa Rica. There's a tour company called Get Your Birds that I put on this slide. If you check them out, some of you may know Ernesto Carmen, whose family owns this Cafe Cristina coffee farm, and he has talked about trying to put together a Cerulean Warbler festival or summit in September. But I'm not sure if he's done it yet, or if he has not invited me, and I will be sad. But this is a spot where you can maybe see ceruleans during migration. So coffee is sort of a major issue for a lot of our migratory songbirds as well as tropical resident birds. And it's a big issue in the wintering habitat for ceruleans too in South America. You may notice, you may recognize this. This is Juan Valdez and his mule. Colombia, of course, is famous for its coffee. It's almost coffee in Colombia. I mean, they're almost Colombian coffee is just, again, famous around the world. But if forests are cleared in Colombia to grow coffee in the full sun, then you can have a problem for, of course, birds like the Cerulean Warbler and other species that may spend the winters in Colombia and other parts of South America. So I was very fortunate to be able to go to a Cerulean Warbler and Golden-winged Warbler summit in Colombia. It's been about 12 years ago now. It doesn't feel like it was that long ago, maybe 11 years, but it still feels very recent to me. I had a wonderful time. If any of you love birds, I know you all do. If you get a chance to go to Colombia, the birding is amazing in Colombia. Colombia has more bird species than any country on the planet. And it's just an incredible place. I had a wonderful time visiting. I saw a lot of birds. I danced. I drank a lot of beer. Like, it was just a great time. Everyone was very, very welcoming and friendly. So I was able to go to the Cerulean and Golden-winged Warbler Summit, the first half of which was at the Colombian Coffee Federation headquarters, which is where this picture was taken. Some of the folks from the Coffee Federation spoke to our group and said, look, we don't want to be known as the destroyers of birds, but if you want us to grow shade-grown coffee, you have to give us a market for it. So coffee originated in Africa, but it will grow well in other tropical regions. So coffee in the tropics of Central and South America, the traditional way that people grew it was to leave the forest and grow the coffee shrubs under the forest canopy. But then in the 1960s, 1970s, the demand for coffee increased dramatically, and a lot of those small kind of family coffee farms were converted to these large sun coffee farms where a lot of the trees were cut down and coffee was grown in the full sun. The coffee grows more quickly in the full sun, so people can turn a profit more quickly and meet the demand. However, there are a lot of other problems that come with that. Of course, for bird habitat, that causes a problem if you remove all the trees, but it can also cause a problem with the loss of small family farms, and increased use in fertilizers and pesticides, and problems with erosion. So the second half of my trip to Colombia, we visited does anyone recognize that bird? It's got two parallel white wing bars and it has a necklace. So this is the Cerulean Warbler Reserve in northeastern Colombia near the town of San Vicente de Chucurí. It's about a 550-acre reserve that is a Colombian oak forest and some coffee plots that they are trying to sort of rehabilitate the coffee plots and grow some trees. So when I walked in the intact forest, the feeling in there was very, very similar to the feeling in a forest in West Virginia, or Pennsylvania or New Jersey or New York. There were some large trees, some smaller trees, some vines, some understory. This is not that much different from, if you remember that Lewis Wetzel wildlife management area slide that I showed at the beginning. It doesn't look all that different. There's a slope, again, some big trees, some smaller trees, some understory vegetation. It looked very similar. The feeling in the forest was very similar. Of course, there were toucanets and oropendulas and other tropical species, but the feeling of the forest was very similar. I wanted to put this slide in here from the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center. I hope that a lot of you are familiar with shade-grown, bird-friendly coffee, but if not, you should check out the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center's website. Their bird-friendly coffee certification is usually considered to be the strictest coffee certification for shade grown coffee. So if you see, and I'll show you what the sticker on the bag looks like at the end here. If you see the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center bird friendly certification on coffee, you can rest assured that that coffee provides habitat for birds, is grown in bird habitat. They've done some surveys, and they have determined that in Peru was where this particular survey, there were 243 bird species that could be found in bird friendly shade grown coffee farms. And then partial shade, a lot fewer, and then sun coffee, even fewer there. So you can also find on their website all of the different criteria for tree species and percent of tree species and how much sun is allowed to get through, and what other kind of crops you can grow alongside coffee. They're very specific, and bird friendly coffee is also USDA organic. So this is what that same forest would look like if you cut all the trees down. This is in the same Cerulean Warbler Reserve. So this is a plot where all the trees had been cut down to grow coffee in the full sun. The reserve is trying to, again, plant some trees among the coffee shrubs to kind of get to shade grown. But at this time I took this photo, this is what this patch looked like. This is a little bit better. This is still probably considered partial shade, or even maybe full sun, but this is probably what they would call partial shade. And these shrubs are the coffee. Only a few trees dotted around this plot. This is getting a little bit better. I saw a Cerulean Warbler in a tree that looked about this size over some coffee shrubs while I was in Colombia. But this is the kind of tree, this sort of larger tree. Bananas are very commonly grown along coffee plots, at least where I was visiting, and you can see some banana trees over on the right side of this picture. But coffee plots that had trees like this that were larger than the banana trees, sort of shading a lot of what was around them, had many birds. I think we had like 12 species of bird in this one tree, including a turquoise Dacnes or turquoise Dacnes tanager. They changed the name at some point recently. It's a Colombian endemic. I think that was my best bird of this trip. It was really amazing. So a lot of our birds that you might see on a shade-grown coffee farm in Colombia, there are a lot. Broadwing hawks will hunt over coffee farms. Eastern wood pewees and western wood pewees, Acadian flycatchers, Swainson's thrush, red-eyed vireos, of course, ceruleans, black-burnian warblers. A lot of black-burnian warblers overwinter in Colombia. Yellow warblers, black and white warblers, Tennessee warblers, summer tanagers, rose-breasted grosbeaks, and the list goes on. A lot of our species may overwinter in these shade-grown coffee farms in South America. Other species that we love, like the wood thrush and the chestnut-sided warbler, a lot of them may stop in Central America and spend the winters on coffee farms there instead of continuing all the way to South America. So shade-grown coffee, it can be a little bit more difficult to find shade-grown coffee from South America than Central America, but shade-grown coffee from Central America is providing habitat for species as well. All right. So this picture I include mostly because it just sort of, the feeling of this place is a lot like here in West Virginia. It's just a similar looking landscape. Very, very beautiful. I hope I get to go back sometime soon. So while I was visiting Colombia, they were having a migratory bird festival, and I'm not sure if this is the town of San Vicente de Chucurí. About 20 of us from the Cerulean and Golden Warbler Summit traveled to this town for the festival, and I hope you can tell that these kids are dressed as Cerulean warblers and golden wing warblers, and it was really incredible. There was a parade through the town about migratory birds, and like my face hurt from smiling so much. And I thought, we should try to do something like this in West Virginia, at the other end of the Ceruleans range. But it was really amazing to see. Of course, Colombia, has this sort of scary reputation, and we did have some military people sort of standing around the edges of the town, and I sort of learned from talking to people that there were folks in our group who worked for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, so the Department of the Interior. So there were some concerns about those people, their safety. But we didn't have any scary situations or any problems at all. And those military folks were often friendly, or always friendly. And uh, the one guy even let me hold his assault rifle, which is probably very against the rules. But everyone was very friendly. Some of the kids who weren't dressed as Cerulean Warblers were wearing Cerulean Warblers, on their visors, which was really very cool. That were all hand painted. And San Vicente de Chucurí also has there are a lot of cacao farms, which is where chocolate comes from. And these kids in this picture on the lower right were dressed as cacao farmers. And they were pointing out birds to me. There were a lot of black vultures right in the city park in San Vicente de Chucurí, and a banana quit I was just looking at in this picture, which was really exciting for me. So wrapping up here. So happily, there are some things we can do to help Cerulean Warblers. The very easiest thing is to just get the shade-grown coffee. If your local store doesn't carry it, you can ask for it. Here, I buy most of mine online from Birds and Beans, just birdsandbeans.com, and they have several varieties that are all really good. This is the old bird-friendly logo from Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center that you may still see on some bags, but they've mostly phased that out. This was sort of the next iteration of their logo, bird-friendly habitat, but this is the current one. So if you see this bird-friendly and Smithsonian on your coffee, you can be confident it's shade-grown, bird-friendly coffee. There are some other certifications that may have a percentage of the coffee shade-grown, but not necessarily all of it. USDA organic may be shade-grown, but it may be not. Bird-friendly is also USDA organic, but all USDA organic is not bird-friendly, if that makes sense. You can also support alternatives to mountaintop removal, coal mining, and other deforestation, which is a little bit tougher, especially here where I live in West Virginia, and I grew up in Pennsylvania. Both my grandfathers worked in the coal industry. My great grandfather's buried in southern West Virginia, really close to the New River Gorge, right where all the Cerulean Warblers are, and he moved there to work in the coal mines. So it can be tough sometimes to sort of support alternatives to this widespread destruction. But I think that we do know that burning coal is not a great sustainable energy source for the future. You can also manage your forest for Cerulean Warblers to help them. Appalachian Mountain Joint Venture, if you visit this website, there are some documents and you kind of search around their website, there are some documents that can help give you some advice on managing your forest for Ceruleans. The 10-second advice is to keep big white oaks, keep chestnut oaks and sugar maples, remove red oaks, red maple, keep some big trees that have a diameter at breast height of 16 inches or more. Leave some grapevines and other understory vegetation. So those are all things you can do to your private forest to help Ceruleans. Support organizations that fund songbird conservation research, and you're all doing that already by being members of a bird club. A lot of the research is funded by the federal government, but there are some nonprofits and bird conservation organizations like National Audubon, American Bird Conservancy, the Nature Conservancy. National Wild Turkey Federation actually funds songbird conservation projects. So supporting those groups can help songbirds as well. And this last thing is something that I want to do better as a birder. In non-COVID times, I would travel fairly often to look for birds. And I think that getting the word out that birds are good for business, that if you have really good areas where there might be interesting birds that people want to travel to see, tell people like, I'm here for birds. If you go to the restaurant, buy lunch, you can say, tell somebody that you're there to watch birds nearby. The message that birds are good for business, I think, is important. And it's not something that I do very well. So thank you very much for listening to me. and I am very happy to answer any questions. I saw that there were some things going in the chat or the Q&A, but I couldn't really see them. I will tell you that this was going to be the picture, or that this picture was one of the candidates for the cover, the book cover, but somebody thought it looked like we were going to eat the bird, or it was like a cookbook cover, so we didn't go with this picture. But I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and then if anybody has questions, I'm happy to talk about them.
Thank you so much, Katie. While people are typing their questions into either the chat or the question and answer box on the right, I just want to say that that was a fantastic presentation. It made me, first of all, want to move to West Virginia because I think it's beautiful, except of course where they've destroyed the mountaintops.
Yes.
The park that you referred to, that's near Washington Crossing itself. It's near Titusville on the map for those people who aren't familiar with this area, is Baldpate, the mountain that is going to be burned. So,
okay.
That's one of the species we're worried about if this burn takes place right now. I don't know if the ceruleans are here yet, but they may come back to find that they're they're stopping over a place, or their breeding place is not what it looked like before. So we'll see what happens, and we will continue to monitor that for everybody, and we'll report back to you what it looks like after this. I also want to mention before I turn the questions over to Katie, is that one of our board members, Tyler Christensen, is giving a talk at the Sourland Conservancy on Thursday, April 22nd, 7 p.m. This is a virtual Zoom, as all these talks are these days, and you can find information about that on sourland.org and where to sign up. And Jim, maybe you could talk about it's the Bucks County birders who are doing one. Also, here I've got it, April 27th at 7 p.m. This is at bucksbirders@gmail.com. We'll get you a link. We'll present, let me see here, Lisa Elizondo, PhD candidate at the University of Delaware, will present the ecology of the northern clapper rail. So bucksbirders@gmail.com to get your Zoom link for that. Okay. Jim, do you want to read some questions?
Sure. Just make a note that I did drop links for those talks into the chat in case anyone is interested. They can find some more information there.
Thank you, Jim.
We have a question from Fairfax, one of our board members. And she asked that since you're from Northeast Pennsylvania, do you have any insight into the apparent decline along the Susquehanna? And she knows that a few breed in Luzerne County. Here in New Jersey, she thinks they used to breed in floodplains, but thinks that the disease affecting sycamores leaf out has caused a decline in those particular populations.
That would make sense. I mean, I know those floodplain forests are where ceruleans were. Again, those are the kind of forests that Audubon noted ceruleans living in. Some of those river valley areas. I don't know exactly about the specific decline along the Susquehanna. And I saw someone else mentioned Wilkes-Barre Kingston. I am actually from Dallas, Pennsylvania, but no one ever knows where that's from. So I usually just say Scranton here in West Virginia, but I'm from Dallas specifically, so Luzerne County. I don't think I've ever seen a Cerulean Warbler in Luzerne County, but I would like to. My parents still live there. But I don't have any insights about the decline. But I would imagine that if the sycamores, are hurt by that, it's certainly possible that would have an impact on their population for sure. But I unfortunately don't have any, I don't know much more about that.
Okay, Robin Wolf asked if you consider Cerulean Warbler to be an endangered species.
Well, so it's tough. I mean, I think they are in danger. But so I tried to read I did read the Endangered Species Act, and I'm definitely not a lawyer. when I was researching this book. And apparently to be considered, a threatened species, you had to be in danger of becoming endangered. And if you're to be considered an endangered species, the species has to be like facing extinction in the foreseeable future. And when ceruleans were denied threatened status, it was because there were still too many to be really threatened with extinction in the foreseeable future. So I think that if you did the math on it, in 100 years, if the decline didn't increase, we would still have ceruleans. So it was, even though they decline rapidly, there are still, they're not in danger of disappearing. At least that was my understanding from reading the ruling and trying to read the act. But they are certainly a songbird that it needs, like a lot of our songbirds are decreasing. And grassland species, I think are especially not doing well. In addition to some of our forest birds, but ducks and raptors are doing better, right? So that's kind of sort of some good news, I guess. But ceruleans and other neotropical migrants that just travel such far distances and have to contend with threats along the whole entire route. It can be it makes me nervous.
Okay, and someone asked you can recommend a few of the best spots in West Virginia where ceruleans can be found.
Sure, I can recommend a bunch. The New River Gorge, you should go there. I mean, the New River Gorge is a great area, lots to do, and a lot of ceruleans. And just a few, I think maybe only a month or two ago, it's now a national park, New River Gorge National Park. It was New River National Recreation Area or something, and now it's a national park. So visit that. If you go to that area, you will have to see ceruleans. And there's a lot of other great birds there also. There are some Swainson's warblers around that area as well. And of course, Kentucky warblers and hooded warblers and all the other folks. The Kanawha State Forest near Charleston, West Virginia is another great place to see ceruleans. It's Charleston, West Virginia is kind of right in the middle of the state. There are a lot of big interstates that hook up right there. But that Kanawha State Forest is another great place to see ceruleans. Near where I live, near Morgantown, where West Virginia University is, and we have Cooper's Rock State Forest has some breeding ceruleans too, and that's just right up the road. And there are some other places as well where you can see them, but I mean, really, that New River Gorge area is it's a good place to visit.
I just a note here that Jackie Spritzer says that this year the New River Gorge Festival will be virtual, so everybody can watch it.
Yes, and it's free. It's virtual and free.
Right.
I will be part of a panel on Sunday when the festival starts. So this coming Sunday, I think it's going to be live on Facebook. I'm not sure who all's on the panel, but I've been very, very happy to be a guide at that festival since I think 2012 was my first year as a guide, and I was a guide every year until COVID. And I miss it a lot. It's a fairly small festival. They keep it small on purpose, so it kind of has a homey sort of feeling, and there's a lot of sitting on the porch and talking, and it's a really nice festival, and you see a lot of ceruleans, and we can also see golden wings and Swainson's warblers. We usually get Swainson's every year too, which is pretty cool.
Nice. There's another.
Muted myself there.
Oh.
Judy Falk asks if there's any concern that increasing push for wind energy might affect cerulean habitats and migration routes, considering where wind farms are often located along ridgelines.
Yeah, I mean, that can be a concern. I'm not sure if I have read about Ceruleans being killed by wind turbines specifically, but I know in West Virginia we've had several significant warbler kills by wind farms, but they've mostly been when, it sounds really silly to say it out loud, but it's like when people leave the lights on at night, the birds seem to get confused and fly into the wind turbines. We had a situation, I think it may have been 10 years ago, or maybe more recently than that. One of our big wind farms in West Virginia had someone left the lights on for a few nights, and I think there were over 100 blackpoll warblers killed, and dozens of other species as well during migration. I think it was in October, maybe. It was a so I imagine that this could potentially be a problem for a lot of our small songbirds that are migrating at night. Lights. It seems that lights of all in all kinds of places can be confusing to migrating songbirds. I mean, I remember I'm always seeing about the 9/11 memorial and the lights going up where the towers, that the birds would get caught in those lights and become exhausted. And then when they turn them off, the birds could fly. So wind farms, but then on the other side of that is, well, if we cut down all the mountains where the birds breed to get coal.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yes, yeah.
Well,
Okay.
ahead, Jim.
Look, Fred Veer has a few questions.
Oh, I see cowbirds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Fred's question is, what % of on-territory males make the whisper call? And has another question about Cerulean songs. What is the biological context, if any, where a male is only doing first half of song in breeding season?
My, those are tough questions.
Well, you should wait till you see his other one.
Oh no, I didn't get the other one. I saw the cowbird question. I didn't see, and that one's easy, but I didn't see the other. But so the whisper song, I have no idea what the percentage is for the males that do the whisper song, but it's really neat when you hear it. So the whisper song, if you don't know what that is, it's just the quiet version of the male song, and it often seems to be directed at the female during like nest construction and figuring out where to build the nest. And it sounds, when I've heard it, it almost sounds like you kind of look around like, oh, that male cerulean must be singing, somewhere down the trail. And then you can hear it again and you think, no, actually, I think it's right nearby. And and if you hear the male singing very quietly nearby, I mean, look for the female because they might be working on a nest, very close by where you hear that. So I don't know what the percentage is, but it's a very neat thing to hear. And it sounds, when I've heard it, it sounds just like the song, which is usually a three-part buzzy z. It's been described as just a little sneeze. I have a friend named Tiffany, and she thinks it sounds like Tiffany. But I have been in some parts of the country where I have heard ceruleans only doing part of the song. And then I've also heard northern Tarulas try to confuse me by also doing part of the cerulean song. I don't know. I'm not sure what the biological reason for that would be, but I have definitely been in. I was birding in. I mean, I usually hear ceruleans in West Virginia, but I was birding in North Carolina along the Blue Ridge Parkway in an area where there was a pocket of a lot of ceruleans, and the song was just different. It just had a different. It just wasn't quite the same. The three parts weren't quite the same, and it really threw me off at first, and I'm not sure. I don't know what the reason for that would be. Different accents. I don't know. And then the cowbirds, I can quickly say that yes, cowbirds parasitize cerulean warbler nests. They've definitely documented them doing that. It happens when you get ceruleans, more fragmentation. You can sometimes get cowbirds coming in, and they will, parasitize cerulean nests. So will red-bellied woodpeckers will eat baby ceruleans in the nest. Sharp-shinned hawks, Cooper's hawks, snakes, chipmunks, kind of the usual suspects.
Right.
There's actually one question in the Q&A. Hannah Southers asked, if someone followed arrival dates in the spring, do ceruleans seem to be tracking earlier bud break dates, or have they started to arrive earlier? Do we have data on changing arrival times given changing of budding and leaf out?
I am not sure if anybody's studied that or not. There are, there's a lot of research that people are looking at. But I am trying to remember if I have read that anywhere. Arrive dates changing. I have not read that. But it might be something that people are looking at. I know that one thing, there are some folks are trying to determine that migratory route, because it can be so difficult to determine. And these geolocators, if you have a turkey vulture, you can stick a big old transmitter on it and figure out where it goes, or a California condor, right? But a cerulean warbler, 10-gram bird, it's a lot more challenging. So I know there are folks working on getting those, making those geolocators smaller and smaller. And then you have to recapture the same bird. So if you put a geolocator on a cerulean in Indiana, which is where some of the geolocator work is being done, you have to recapture that same bird when it comes back to Indiana the following spring. So, and then you get the geolocator off and look at the data. So I know there are folks studying that. There are also people looking at how well ceruleans respond to private forest management. There are some different techniques, that some of them that we've talked about tonight, that some biologists have suggested you can do to your private forest to manage for ceruleans, and there are people studying how well those management practices work, how successful they are or unsuccessful.
Okay. Jim, do you want to read the difficult Fred Veer question, or shall I?
No, is there more difficult? Are they not difficult yet?
It's very specific. He was
Was
wondering if there are any recommended or proven line transect or survey methods for surveying a large area. I'm assuming specifically for cerulean warblers in this case.
Oh my gosh, I'm not sure, Fred. I don't know. I sort of think of myself as like the translator of science, and I don't really know what the I am not sure. Yeah, that's a difficult question. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I can't answer that one.
Yeah, I don't know anybody who could actually, right off the top of my head. Oh. Fred also says, well, if no percent is a commonly heard, I think he was referring to the whisper call in that.
Oh, the whisper song.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how, ceruleans are, I don't know. I think I would say that it might be fairly commonly, I guess, I don't know. I'm sort of a cerulean warbler nerd though. So I don't know if other people are commonly hearing it or not.
It sounds like, I'm sorry, I did interrupt. It sounds like if you're lucky to be near a nest, you have a reasonable chance of hearing it, right? But
yes,
that's not.
If you're if you're lucky enough to be near a nest during nest construction, that's when you can hear that song. Yeah, but I don't. Again, I know I look for it and listen for it, but I might be the only one. I don't know. It's something that I have heard on more than one occasion, so it's probably not incredibly rare, but I'm also very focused on finding ceruleans anytime I go outside.
Well, that's awesome. Hey, anybody have any more questions? Oh, okay, I see. All right. No more questions in the Q&A and no more comments in the chat. So I guess we have exhausted all the questions.
All right.
I just want to let people know that if you came in late tonight, Katie kindly did allow us to record this. So if you missed part of the program, you have a second chance to hear the beginning. Katie, thank you so much. I really enjoyed that presentation. I'm sure our audience did too, and it was great to have you here with us tonight.
Well, thank you very much for having
Lots of people agree from the audience. The thank yous are coming in.
Oh, great.
Fast
Oh,
and furious.
Yes, great. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening to me. And I hope we can, travel around in
Maybe
real
we'll have
life
you back in
soon.
the future to talk about vultures, because that happens to be a bird I am very fond of. A lot of people
Excellent.
aren't, but I think they're underappreciated.
Yes, me too. Yep, they're my two favorite species are turkey vultures and cerulean warblers.
Interesting
Yes.
dichotomy.
Yes.
Well, I can hardly wait to hear what you have to say about the vultures too.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thanks again for having
Okay,
me.
well, thanks everybody for joining us tonight. And with that, I think we'll say good night and see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks.